And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Well, the clock is ticking. The government shuts down in just 8 days unless Congress agrees on a bill to fund federal agencies. On Friday, the House passed a measure to keep the government going till mid-December. But they also cut off funding for Obamacare, and as you just heard, Majority Leader Harry Reid says that is dead in the Senate. Joining me now from Houston, Senator Ted Cruz, who is leading the drive for this confrontation. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be with you this morning.
You say, and we just played a clip of it, you'll do whatever you can, including a talking filibuster, to block consideration of the bill that the House just passed. The problem is that you would be blocking a bill which you actually support, which would fund the government but defund Obamacare. So how are you going to get other Republican senators on board to block a bill that you support?
Well, let's be clear. Last week's vote was a tremendous victory. Just a few weeks ago, no pundit in Washington thought it was possible we would see the vote we saw on Friday. Last week, the House of Representatives voted to defund Obamacare, and now next week, as you note, the fight moves to the Senate. And I think next week is a time for party unity. I think next week, all Senate Republicans, I hope, should come together and support the House bill. In my view, Senate Republicans should stand united to stop Harry Reid from changing the House bill, and in particular, from inserting the funding from Obamacare with 51 votes. That's going to be the fight, is procedurally whether he's able to use a straight party line vote, use just Democrats to put Obamacare back. And you know what? If Senate Republicans stand together, we can stop Harry Reid from doing that.
Well, I'm confused. Are you going to block consideration of the bill? Basically, what is the first issue is, are you going to allow consideration of the bill? And you can filibuster that. After, if you lose that, then a simple majority could take out Obamacare. So are you going to allow consideration of the bill, have an up or down vote on defunding Obamacare, or are you going to block them from even taking up a bill which you support?
Well, the first order of business is going to be to ask Harry Reid if he will agree to allow amendments to be subject to a 60-vote threshold. And that's typical in the Senate. We have a lot of amendments that are subject to 60-vote thresholds. Now, in all likelihood, he's going to say no, because he wants to use brute political power to force Obamacare funding through with just Democrats, exactly the same way he passed the bill 3 years ago. Now, if he does that, then Senate Republicans have the tool that we always use when the majority leader is abusing his power, which is we can deny cloture. We can filibuster and say, we will not allow you to add the funding back for Obamacare with just 51 votes.
Sir, if I may, you say that this is brute political power. Other times you've said it's a procedural gimmick. It's Senate Rule 22, which has been around for years. It's part of the Senate rules, and it says after you allow debate, after you take cloture, that you can pass an amendment by a simple majority. That's the rule.
Chris, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You're right, that is one rule, but there is another rule that says it takes 60 votes to get cloture. And that's the reason the Senate generally, on controversial votes, we work out an agreement for it to be subject to a 60-vote threshold, because the minority, if the majority is going to run the minority over with a train, the minority has the ability to stop them. And so if Harry Reid says, you know what, I'm going to run the Republicans over, I'm going to ignore the bill passed by the House of Representatives, I'm going to ignore the will of the people, and I'm going to do this on a 51-vote threshold, then from my mind, it should be an easy decision for Senate Republicans to stand united and to support House Republicans. And I'll tell you, any vote for cloture, any vote to allow Harry Reid to add funding for Obamacare with just a 51-vote threshold, a vote for cloture is a vote for Obamacare. And I think Senate Republicans are going to stand side by side with Speaker Boehner and House Republicans, listening to the people and stopping this train wreck that is Obamacare.
Okay, a couple of quick questions. First of all, you need 41 votes. You're one vote. You need 40 other Republican senators to go with you to block consideration of the House bill in the Senate. How many votes do you have right now, Senator?
Well, we don't know right now, and this week will determine. Look, this has been a fast-moving target. You know, just a few weeks ago, we didn't have anywhere near the votes we needed in the House or in the Senate. And my view all along was this was going to be a long journey. This was going to be multiple stages. Stage one was unify the American people. And we've seen nearly 1.6 million Americans sign a national petition at don'tfundit.com and call their representatives saying, stop Obamacare. Stage 2 was what happened on Friday, the House voting to defund Obamacare. Stage 3 is next week, where Senate Republicans, it's now our turn to unify, to stand together with House Republicans. And then the next step, look, this may end up going back to the House, and I hope and fully believe the House will continue the fight. And if we take this to the American people, I believe the next step after that is starting to get red state Democrats, starting to get, if you're a Mark Pryor, if you're a Mary Landrieu running for re-election in Arkansas and Louisiana, and you start to get 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 calls from your constituents, suddenly it changes the calculus entirely. But Chris, that won't happen until we unify Republicans in the Senate.
Senator, here's the question everyone on both sides is asking in Washington, which is, what's your end game? Let's say that you block consideration of any bill in the Senate, or let's say that you lose and the bill goes into the Senate and they take out Obamacare and they send it back to the House. What's your end game? Because the government is going to shut down a week from Monday.
Well, I don't want the government to shut down. The American people don't want the government to shut down, and I don't think Harry Reid and President Obama should shut down the government. Listen, if that happens, if Harry Reid kills this bill in the Senate, I think the House should hold its ground and should begin passing smaller continuing resolutions, one department at a time. It should start with a continuing resolution focused on the military. Fund the military, send it over, and let's see if Harry Reid is willing to shut down the military just because he wants to force Obamacare on the American people. I think that would be a very perilous decision for Harry Reid to make, and the House can keep driving this. Look, the House is the only body where Republicans have a majority, and so the House has to lead on this. And I view my job and Mike Lee's job as providing as much support, as much air cover as we can for the House to stand up and lead, and I commend them for having done that last week.
Senator, I think, excuse me, I think it's fair to say that you have ticked off a whole bunch of your fellow Republicans who feel that you have gotten them into this fight without an end game, without a strategy. I want to put some of their criticisms, they've gone on the record, on the screen. Congressman Tim Griffin of Arkansas wrote, so far, Senate Republicans are good at getting Facebook likes and town halls, not much else. Do something. Republican Congressman Pete King of New York calls you a fraud. If he can deliver on this, fine. If he can't, he should keep quiet from now on, and we shouldn't listen to him. And Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee sent this, I didn't go to Harvard or Princeton, which you did, but I can count. Republicans, especially in the House, say that you are pushing them into a fight that you don't know how to finish. Senator?
Well, look, there are lots of folks in Washington that can choose to throw rocks, and I'm not going to reciprocate. I'm not going to do likewise. Listen, let me tell you about a broader problem. A broader problem is we have got career politicians in both parties in Washington who aren't listening to the American people. I spent the entire month of August traveling Texas, traveling the country, speaking to the people, and the American people are hurting because Obamacare isn't working. It's killing jobs. It's driving up their health insurance rates. It's causing them to be pushed into part-time work. It's causing them to lose their health insurance. And I'll tell you why an awful lot of people in Washington are unhappy. Because they're hearing from their constituents in overwhelming numbers that their constituents are saying, stand up and fight, stand up for principle. Don't have an exception for Congress and big corporations that doesn't apply to the American people.
Senator, I want to pick up on that. Democrats feel that you have given them the political high ground in all this. I want to play what President Obama said last night, to the Congressional Black Caucus.
You'd be willing to shut down the government and potentially default for the first time in United States history because it bothers you so much that we're actually going to make sure that everybody has affordable health care.
Senator, you're completely right. According to all the polls, people don't like Obamacare. On the other hand, by an even wider margin, people don't want to shut down the government to have this fight. In fact, there's a new Republican poll out late last week, a Republican poll, Winston Group, 71 to 23. Don't shut down the government over this.
Well, it depends how the poll is phrased, and there are a lot of polls out there. Rasmussen just last week said a majority of Americans now want Obamacare defunded. And you know what's interesting? Last week, Wall Street Journal, for the first time in years, found Republicans are leading on health care. Americans trust Republicans more than Democrats on health care. And Chris, let me suggest the whole reason why is because we've been standing up, leading the fight to defund Obamacare. Voters have learned enough talk from Washington, stand up and do it. And listen, all you have to do is get out of Washington, D.C. and go listen to the American people. You talk to small businesses that are laying people off. You talk to people that are struggling for jobs and finding their hours forcibly reduced to 29 hours a week. And by the way, the people who are hurting, I hear from my constituents every single day, women with pre-existing conditions who are losing their health care because of Obamacare. Their employers are dropping their health insurance
Senator,
coverage.
I hate to interrupt. We're almost out of time. I just want to ask you one direct question. You have a lot of valid criticisms of Obamacare. We're going to ask Senator McCaskill in the next segment about those. But if it comes down, if the Senate ping-pongs this back to the House and it's a question, keep going on the fight about Obamacare or shut down the government, what's your position? Keep the government going or keep fighting about Obamacare?
I believe we should stand our ground, and I don't think Harry Reid and Barack Obama should shut down the federal government. Look, the House voted last week to fund the federal government. If Harry Reid kills that, Harry Reid is responsible for shutting down the government, and he should listen to the American people, open the government, fund the government, but don't fund Obamacare because it's hurting the American people. It's not working. That's why the unions want out. That's why Harry Reid and Senator McCaskill and Senate Democrats want out, is because it's not working.
Senator, we're going to talk about all of that with Senator McCaskill in the next segment. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll stay on top of the battle of the budget. Should be interesting.
Thank you, Chris.